Hello, my name is Mark Reed. I am a professor of rural entrepreneurship and I co-direct a centre on natural capital at Scotland's Rural College. Now, I think we are all increasingly aware of the importance of peatlands in the global carbon cycle and why it is so essential to protect, conserve, to sustainably manage and, where necessary, restore these habitats so that we can keep the carbon locked in our peatlands in the soil where it belongs. And of course, we want to base our policies and practices on evidence wherever we possibly can. But that is not about just taking the latest study that suggests we do one thing. Instead, responsible policymaking is about reviewing that body of evidence, including studies that say one thing versus another, depending on the timescale over which they were conducted, the context, the altitudes, the peatland type, etc. And to get that sense of actually what the body of work says, we need evidence synthesis. But that's a problem. Almost everyone who tries to do an evidence synthesis in this area discovers that there are multiple studies out there, but they've all measured different things. And even where they have measured the same thing, they've measured it in different ways. And even if they measure the same thing in the same way, they may well have reported it in a very different way. And they may even have reported it in the same way, but they haven't then reported all of the contextual data in terms of, well, what was the peat depth? Where was it? What altitude was it at? What was the gradient it was on? The climate, all of that stuff, which you actually need to be able to interpret the findings of those studies and integrate it. And so my colleagues and I set out in collaboration with the International Union for the Conservation of Nature's UK Peatland Programme for the UK, and then for tropical peatlands in collaboration with UNEP's Global Peatlands Initiative, to try and reach agreement amongst the scientific policy practitioner community, but primarily experts who are out there collecting this data, and get a consensus in what are the key things we should, wherever possible, be measuring. So to do this, we organised a consensus process where we brought together experts from the UK and from the tropics to try and agree on what are the core, the most important variables that wherever possible we should be trying to measure, whether that's a research project or a monitoring programme, perhaps post-restoration. And we did that in 4 different categories. So we've got climatic variables, carbon accumulation rates, greenhouse gas fluxes and the like, hydrological variables, biodiversity variables, fire variables, especially in the tropics. And the idea is now that if we've got these core sets of variables to choose from, then if I'm a researcher, if I'm running a monitoring program of all the things I could measure, here's some guidance now on the key things that ideally we need to know about to inform policy and practice. And if I choose from these lists, then I increase the likelihood that I'm measuring the same things as other people, which then means that we are much more likely to be able to synthesize, integrate findings from across different studies and provide much better synthetic evidence to policy and practice. There is, of course, more work to be done. We might understand what the core variables are that we're all looking for, but we need to decide what methods are most appropriate to collect data for each of these variables. And we need to think about how we're going to report that data as well, using tools like Peat Data Hub. Ultimately, this paper is a first step, but we hope an important first step towards standardising how we collect and can synthesise peatland data around the world so that we can provide better evidence to policy and practice to protect these incredible habitats.